All right, good evening. I'm responding to Trevor Kuba's response that genetically modified food will be beneficial to society. His three claims are that genetically modified foods are safe for human consumption, that GMOs reduce the need for pesticides, and GMO foods have the potential to help people in need, more specifically like in world hunger. So to begin with, it's really unsure like how safe they are, and it's difficult to prove that. According to Dr. Hubert, botany and plant professor from Purdue University, he states, despite what the media and experts proclaim, there are no previous scientific papers establishing the safety of GMO crops. So what this means is that the papers that we've read about the safety of GMOs, they're kind of questionable because they're not really fact-checked, they're not reviewed upon. So it puts their validity in question. A research done by University of Minnesota School of Public Health states that the new gene can interfere with metabolic pathways, causing a stressed plant to produce more toxins in response. So that means because we're manipulating the genes and the genetic makeup of the organisms and of the plants, it causes it to be more to under stress, releasing toxins which can be harmful to us. And then GMOs also release glyphosate-resistant GMOs were created to kill off weeds around the crop, allowing the crop to thrive and which led to the creation of Roundup. So what Roundup is a herbicide, and through runoff like water or through just spraying on it, it can get on the plant. But the thing with glyphosate herbicide is that it's linked to liver and kidney damage. So in all actuality, it's kind of difficult to prove how safe they are on both sides due to like the lack of fact checking and just a bunch of uncertainties there. The second thing was that genetically modified crops reduce the need for pesticides, which is true, but only to a certain extent. This is because with the use of GMOs, you create plants that are resistant to insects and stuff like that. And so you're using less, but these insects have grown immune to that. So it's like an antibiotic, you know, when your doctor tells you to take your whole medicine, if not, these bugs can survive and become stronger. And it's similar to that. Dan Charles from the Food and Agriculture correspondent for NPR states that genetically modified insect-protected corn has allowed farmers to reduce their use of insecticides to fight the corn rootworm and European corn borer. This, however, concerns the effect will last. Corn rootworms have evolved resistant to one of the genes that has been deployed against them. So pretty much that's just an example how corn rootworms is a worm that feeds off of corn-based products. They're becoming more resistant to pesticides. So in order to combat that, you have to create something stronger, which can be as dangerous. Also, because you're not using as much pesticides, you're using more herbicides. Edward Perry from the Kansas State University has stated that farmers may be using more herbicides on glyphosate crops in recent years because they have to fight off an increasing number of weeds that have evolved to become resistant to glyphosate. So you're not using as much pesticides, which can be as harming, but you're using more herbicides, which, as we saw, glyphosate herbicides cause liver damage and kidney damage. His last claim was that GMOs will can have a potential to help in the fight against world hunger, and that's difficult to prove, and it shows that it won't be as effective because a large product of the GMOs we produce of the food is corn and soybean based, and a lot of that product goes towards feeding animals and biofuels. So it says according to the environmental group working, 80% of the land area devoted to growing genetically engineered crops are both overwhelmingly used for animals and biofuels. So even if we produce way more GM crops, they're going to be corn and soybean based, which won't help the dietary benefits of a lot of people, and a lot of it is going towards biofuels and feeding the animals. And there's an argument saying that GM crops can help produce more, which is true, but it's been proven that that doesn't really help out people in need, because what they need is more resources. According to the International Fund for Agriculture Development, it says what truly limits the productivity of small farmers is lack of basic resources such as fertilizer, water, and infrastructure to transport crops to the market. So what's that saying? Pretty much that the yield will help out, but what will help out more is just providing them basic access to resources, just as infrastructure to get to the marketplaces, and access to water and fertilizers and things like that. Thank you.
All right, structurally things seem like they're in pretty good shape. You have a general argument on the first point that suggests that the research that's been done so far is not peer-reviewed, and it's certainly not definitive, and that is the clearest argument that directly argues an issue that the advocate presented. In other words, their evidence or their reasoning. The rest of your arguments are good arguments, but they are all rebuttal arguments, so you're kind of putting your eggs in that basket, so to speak, and it's not necessarily that they are bad responses, but I do think a diversity of responses is probably called for. So the first point is the one where you did a little bit more of that diversity, and then you have the follow-up argument that talks about Roundup as a herbicide, it being linked to other kinds of dangers. I think that's your argument is a little bit of a trade-off, but you also say, and it's difficult to tell in this situation as well. So the argument I hear you making on this particular point is that the information is uncertain and the conclusion is ambiguous, so I guess we shouldn't be believing what the advocate is talking about. On the second point, when you're talking about developing resistance and potential problems, I thought that your best information showed that some of the corn that they are doing is having problems with the, I guess it's the corn worms that you're talking about here, and I thought that was pretty reasonable. It's a good illustration of that particular point. We're back to the same issue, though. There's not really any discussion of what the advocate's argument was on this point. We just have the counterclaim that's being presented here. And it's a reasonable counterclaim, but there are other arguments that might be, like if we were extending this debate, I think the first thing that the advocate would do is go back to their original arguments, point out the things that they said that were not denied here, argue that those things have been basically accepted, and then try to address the argument that you're presenting here specifically, and you just leave a lot of territory then available for them to kind of fall back on. On the argument about it not being helpful, I do think that you have a good, I don't remember exactly what the advocate's information and evidence was on this point, so it's a little hard to contrast and see if you're talking about their reasoning process here, but you do have a good counter-causality argument that you're presenting here, that there is basically a barrier. This would be what we call a workability argument in a debate, and so when we're talking about that later on, would somebody remind me of this so I have a contemporary example? All right, thank you.